Hi there, I'm Lisa Arana and welcome to today's Assemble This video. I have a fun little set of cards today with a little bit of sass and cuteness. We're going to be doing some Copic marker coloring and lots of die cutting and layering pattern papers today. I'm featuring the Spoiler Alert December 2019 Sentiment Kit from Unity Stamp Company, full of little sassy sayings, and then just paired it with these cute little bird guys from the By Golly Be Jolly kit. I have all my images pre-stamped on some pattern paper using Gina K Amalgam ink. This ink is Copic friendly, and it's stamped beautifully on the pattern paper that I'm using. And we're just going to be doing some real simple coloring. I'm using R24 as my red today. And I did color up 4 different sets of cards. I'm only going to show you 2 today, mainly because it's really simple coloring and I used all the same colors for each of the 4 car fronts. So I'm just coloring in this little Santa guy's hat. These are little birdies, they're little peeps, I guess, and they're all dressed up for the holidays. This one happens to be a Santa. So I'm going to color him in. Basically, I'm using the pattern paper as the color of the body. E30 was a great choice just to add a little bit of shading underneath the hat and the outline of the body and right above the beard area, just because it kind of matched the pattern paper and just kind of created a natural shadow for this little guy. So now I'm going to add a little bit of shadow to the hat. This ended up not really being necessary, but if you were going to leave this guy natural and not add any of the white that I'm going to add later on, then you'll definitely want to add a bit of a shadow. I used N1 and then again used my blender pen to just kind of soften the edge on that. Now I'm using Y11 for my yellow, and I used that on the beak and then his feet. And I'm just going to use a white gel pen to color in the little top of his hat and then the brim of his hat as well. And I'm using some circular and kind of lined motions. It creates a bit of texture that I'm looking for, kind of like his hat is fluffy. And then in his beard and his mustache, I'm using more of a stroke, a straight line stroke. Again, I'm looking to add some texture like it's a beard, and that kind of flows more in lines. So I'm starting at the top and then kind of moving down to the bottom of his beard and creating some movement and texture with just some short strokes and filling in his beard and his mustache with that white gel pen. Here's a bit of a close-up of that texture. You can see the circular motions in the hat and then the straight lines in the beard. So that's the first one that I colored, and then now we're going to move on to the little elf guy here. And it's real similar again. This time I'm using G24, so a green, and I'm just going to do some real simple coloring in his hat. Just filling in the lines. What I like about coloring on pattern paper is it's really forgiving, though the markers can bleed a lot more, so I prefer to do more simple coloring. That way I don't create layers and layers of ink, which can bleed outside the stamped area. You could do some real simple shading or get really involved on these. You just really have to be careful of bleeding so it doesn't bleed outside your image. Now we're just going to do his little curly Q hair at the top of his head here, and I'm using E35 for that. And then back to the body, again I'm using E30 and just going to be doing, again, an outline of the body, just creating a little bit of shading along his hairline and his wings, just to create a bit of depth so he's not so flat against the paper. And then a little bit of my blender pen just to kind of soften those edges a little bit. Back to my Y11 for his beak and his legs. Super easy. I really like easy coloring. Sometimes I just like going back to the basics, especially with cartoony like images like this little guy. They take to simple coloring really easy. And then we're just going to fill in all the white areas with the white gel pen. Again, kind of creating a little bit of texture at the top of the hat, that little ball. And that's it. He's all colored in and almost done. The last thing I want to do is create a little bit of grounding or shadow at the bottom of these little guys. And I'm starting at their ankles, and I just create a little bit of a line and then some short strokes to fill in a bit of a shadow of the ground there. I'm using E31 and again my blender pen just to kind of blend those out, kind of soften them up a little bit so it's not such, you know, stark straight lines. And again, I started at right at his ankle bend, created a bit of a straight line and then filled it in a little bit, tapering towards the bottom to create a bit of a shadow, and then just blended that out. There we go. We have our 2 images out of 4 colored for you. Again, they're all basically colored the same with the same colors. So for this card, and this is the first one of 4, I have my card base covered in pattern paper. And I'm just going to mat this little guy on a small scalloped rectangle. And I'm just getting rid of any excess glue that I have with this little glue eraser tool that I have. And then I want him to be in the corner, and I'm just going to trim off the edges. So I'm eyeballing that. I'm going to grab a pencil, just make some lines. That way I know where to cut those off in my paper trimmer. I added a bit of foam adhesive to the back and just going to line that up in the bottom corner. And you could leave this one just as it is, but I couldn't leave it alone. So I grabbed my black Nuvo drops, and I'm just going to add a few drops here and there. I do like to test it out on a scrap piece of paper just to make sure it's flowing. And I'm starting with a larger drop and then a little bit of a smaller one, and then kind of moving it around, kind of seeing where I want to place those drops. I'm doing them in a group of 3, odd numbers, and varying my sizes. Just creates a little bit of movement and interest to this little guy. So for our second card, I have another scalloped panel of pattern paper, and I'm just going to glue this down a bit to an angle. And I'm just kind of eyeballing, seeing what I like. That's okay. And then I forgot I needed to add some string. This is a side fold card, so I want to make sure I add it to my scallop panel. Otherwise I have to do a bit of card surgery to get that string to wrap around. So I'm wrapping it around my panel, and I'm just going to tie a real quick bow to the side here. Wasn't quite happy with the placement of that one. I didn't have a long enough tail, so I had to make it longer. Rewrap my string, and then I'll just tie a quick bow around it all and over to the side. And you can always play with these. Unfortunately, I did put glue on the back, so I'm having a little bit harder time moving my string around. If you would remember beforehand, I would wait and add your glue at the last minute. And I'm just going to lay this down on my card front at a bit of an angle. I like that bit of interest. You could also do it straight on and be more of a straight line, but I kind of like the wonkiness of that tilted panel. And then we're just going to put this guy right in the center here. I think I like that. I did put some foam adhesive on the back of that panel. And then I'm just going to lift up the edges of that pattern paper just to create, again, a little bit more texture and interest. And then fiddle with my bow a little bit and trim it down. So that's card number 2. So card number 3, we're going to do a little bit more die cutting and layering of pattern paper. I die cut the bottom of both of these pieces of pattern paper with a bit of a scallop kind of curve, which I thought was really cute. Just going to glue those together. And then I didn't feel like there was enough contrast between the busy background paper on the card front and the ones that I scalloped. So I'm going to add a strip of black cardstock just to create a bit of a divider. So I have one for the top here, and I'm using some scraps that I had sitting on my table. So I did a strip at the top, and then I'm going to add another strip to the bottom right underneath the scallops. It was mainly the scallops that I was having a hard time with. I really couldn't see them against the busyness of the background. So adding the black strip of paper just kind of helps your eye see those scallops. I thought they were too pretty to miss. So I'm just going to trim off my sides here. And then add some string like I did to the previous card. Just wrap it around about 3 times. Tie a little bow. And I like to leave my bows kind of big and loose just so I can mess around with them in case I want to change my mind as I go along. Just going to pull that down a little bit. I didn't really like the black at the top, so I'm just going to cover that up with my panel. But I do like the black at the bottom. So I glued that down, added a bit of foam adhesive to my little elf guy, and then popped that up on the front of my card. And then just fiddled with my bow and trimmed off those ends, not edges. And just like that. And that's card number 3. Let's move on to our final card. Lots more layering of pattern paper this time. I have some stitch die cut panels of 2 different pattern papers that I'm just going to glue directly down onto my card front that's also covered in a pattern paper. I like to leave the edges without glue, that way I can lift them up and create a bit of dimension, which I'm doing here. And I'm liking that placement. I felt like all the pattern paper that I put behind the little guy got lost, so I'm just going to add a few to the bottom corner of my card. Just have a couple strips and then cutting the end off at an angle to create almost like a ribbon strip. And we'll glue down strip number 1. And then my tape runner ran out, so I have to quickly refill that. And then we'll glue down strip number 2 right on top. I like the layered effect, and I also like how it kind of pulls from the background. And then I left a little bit of a tab. I like the little bit of overhang to the side. And then I'm just using some red string, and I'm going to wrap that around my fingers a few times to create almost a layered bow, and then just tie those all together. Like that. I'm going to grab my tiny attacher. And I'm just going to staple those in place with 2 little staples. Again, I'm just looking for a little bit more texture and interest in the card, and I thought this would be kind of cute. Trim off my bow tails here. Added a bit of foam adhesive to the back of the panel, and then just going to stick that down onto our card front here. So here's a final look at card number 1. Just Pretend You Love It, with our little Santa peeps and a bit of Nouveau drops. And I just love the dimension of that panel popped up behind or in front of that striped pattern paper. And here is card number 2. You're lucky. I was going to keep this for myself. And another little elf-like peep. And I love the layering of the pattern paper, the different shapes from that scalloped pattern paper, and then the bow, just a sweet little element to kind of finish off everything. Card number 3 says, "It's the thought that counts, right? Remember that." I love the little sassiness of these sentiments. They're perfect for cards or, I don't know, a gift tag, and they're perfect for all year round. You don't have to use them only for Christmas. They'll be great for any gift that you give throughout the year. So that was card number 3 with all that layering and die cutting with the scalloped edges. And then our final card that says, "Sorry, you can't always get what you want." Lots of pattern paper layered, and then the cute little element down in the corner with the ribbon strips and the bow stapled on. So here is the final set with all of our fun and sassy sentiments, plus lots of ideas for a different look on each card. I'll have all the supplies linked below. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you have any questions or a sweet comment, just post below. I love to read each and every one. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye!